Appendix 1. God is red. Sierra Club versus Morton involved federal approval of the extensive ski development in the Mineral King Valley in the Sequoia National Forest. In this suit, Justice William O. Douglas dissented from the majority and wrote what may come to be regarded in later years as the first major effort in the history of American jurisprudence to incorporate a contemporary understanding of nature into law. Douglas's effort to redefine man's relationship with nature by recognizing the standing of a particular feature of nature to sue is a fascinating review of the many non-human entities that have been recognized in law for commercial and criminal purposes. It would have, or at least should have, according to Justice Douglas, been a natural step to come full circle and vest in the lands and rivers themselves a legal power to be represented in the courts of the land. Douglas's opinion is reproduced in full below. Mr. Justice Douglas, dissenting. I share the views of my brother Blackmun and would reverse the judgment below. The critical question of standing would be simplified and also put neatly in focus if we fashioned a federal rule that allowed environmental issues to be litigated before federal agencies or federal courts in the name of the inanimate object about to be despoiled, defaced, or invaded by roads and bulldozers, and where injury is the subject of public outrage. Contemporary public concern for protecting nature's ecological equilibrium should lead to the conferral of standing upon environmental objects to sue for their own preservation. See Stone. Should trees have standing? 45 Southern California Law Revision 450, 1972. This suit would therefore be properly labeled as Mineral King versus Morton. Inanimate objects are sometimes parties in litigation. A ship has a legal personality, a fiction found useful by maritime purposes. The corporation's soul, a creature of ecclesiastical law, is an acceptable adversary, and large fortunes ride on its cases. The ordinary corporation is a person for purposes of the adjudicatory process, whether it represents proprietary, spiritual, aesthetic, or charitable causes. So it should be as respects valleys, alpine meadows, rivers, lakes, estuaries, beaches, ridges, groves of trees, swampland, or even air that feels the destructive pressures of modern technology and modern life. The river, for example, is the living symbol of all the life it sustains or nourishes. Fish, aquatic insects, water ouzels, otter, fisher, deer, elk, bear, and all other animals, including man, who are dependent on it or who enjoy it for its sight, its sound, or its life. The river, as plaintiff, speaks for the ecological unit of life that is part of it. Those people who have a meaningful relation to that body of water, whether it be a fisherman, a canoeist, a zoologist, or a logger, must be able to speak for the values which the river represents and which are threatened with destruction. I do not know Mineral King. I have never seen it nor traveled it, though I have seen articles describing its proposed development, notably Hano, Protectionists versus Recreationists, The Battle of Mineral King. New York Times Magazine, August 17, 1969. And Browning, Mickey Mouse in the Mountains. Harper's, March 1972, page 65. The Sierra Club, in its complaint, alleges that one of the principal purposes of the Sierra Club is to protect and conserve the national resources of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The district court held that this uncontested allegation made the Sierra Club sufficiently aggrieved to have standing to sue on behalf of Mineral King. Mineral King is doubtless like other wonders of the Sierra Nevada, such as Tulameen Meadows, and the John Muir Trail. Those who hike it, fish it, hunt it, camp in it, or frequent it, or visit it merely to sit in solitude and wonderment are legitimate spokesmen for it. And whether they may be a few or many, those who have that intimate relation with the inanimate object about to be injured, polluted, or otherwise despoiled are its legitimate spokesmen. The Solicitor General, whose views on this subject are in the appendix to this opinion, takes a wholly different approach. He considers the problem in terms of government by the judiciary. And with all respects, the problem is to make certain that the inanimate objects, which are the very core of America's beauty, have spokesmen before they are destroyed. It is, of course, true that most of them are under the control of a federal or state agency. The standards given those agencies are usually expressed in terms of the public interest. Yet, public interest has so many differing shades of meaning as to be quite meaningless on the environmental front. Congress accordingly has adopted ecological standards in the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, and guidelines for agency actions who have been provided by the Council on Environmental Quality, of which Russell E. Train is chairman. Yet the pressures on agencies for favorable action, one way or another, are enormous. The suggestion that Congress is too remote to give meaningful direction, and its machinery is too ponderous to use very often. The federal agencies of which I speak are not venal or corrupt, but they are notoriously under the control of powerful interests who manipulate them through adversary committees or friendly working relations, or who have that natural affinity with the agency which in time develops between the regulator and the regulated. As early as 1894, Attorney General Olney predicted that regulatory agencies might become industry minded, as illustrated by his forecast concerning the Interstate Commerce Commission. The commission is or can be made of great use to the railroads. It satisfies the public clamor for supervision of the railroads. At the same time, that supervision is almost entirely nominal. Moreover, the older the commission gets to be, the more likely it is to take a business and railroad view of things. And years later, a court of appeals observed the recurring question which has plagued public regulation of industry is whether the regulatory agency is unduly oriented toward the interests of the industry it is designed to regulate rather than the public interest it is supposed to protect. The Forest Service, one of the federal agencies behind the scheme to despoil Mineral King, has been notorious for its alignment with lumber companies. Although its mandate from Congress directs it to consider the various aspects of multiple use in its supervision of the national forests. The voice of the inanimate object, therefore, should not be stilled. That does not mean that the judiciary takes over the managerial functions from the federal agency. It merely means that before these priceless bits of Americana, such as a valley, an alpine meadow, a river, or a lake, are forever lost or are so transformed as to be reduced to the eventual rubble of our urban environment, the voice of the existing beneficiaries of these environmental wonders should be heard. Perhaps they will not win. Perhaps the bulldozers of progress will plow under the aesthetic wonders of this beautiful land. That is not the present question. The sole question is, who has standing to be heard? And those who hike the Appalachian Trail into Sunfish Pond, New Jersey, and camp or sleep there, or run the Allagash in Maine, or climb the Guadalupes in West Texas, or who canoe and portage the Cutico Superior in Minnesota, certainly should have standing to defend those natural wonders before courts or agencies, though they live 3,000 miles away. Those who merely are caught up in environmental news or propaganda and flock to defend these waters or areas may be treated differently. That is why these environmental issues should be tended by the inanimate object itself. Then there will be assurances that all of the forms of life which it represents will stand before the court. The pileated woodpecker as well as the coyote and bear, the lemmings as well as the rout in the streams. Those inarticulate members of the ecological group cannot speak, but those people who have so frequented the place as to know its values and wonders will be able to speak for the entire ecological community. Ecology reflects the land ethic, and although Leopold wrote in a Sand County Almanac 204 in 1949, the land ethic simply enlarges the boundaries of the community to include soils, waters, plants, and animals, or collectively the land. That, as I see it, is the issue of standing in the present case and controversy. Appendix 2. Looks like that's just the names. We're all done. Thank you so much for listening and being here with me. This was a great read. There might be a little bit more here. Hold on, let me see. Yep, Appendix 3. We'll read this. When I was a boy, I often accompanied my father on trips to different Sea reservations in South Dakota. And during these trips, he would point out various features of the landscapes and tell me the names and stories associated with them. Regrettably, I can only remember a few of the places today, but indelibly imprinted on my mind was the fact that the Sea people cherished their lands and treated them as if they were people who shared a common history with humans. In 1972, when I was writing the first version of this book, I sought to emphasize the role that spaces and places play in our human religious perceptions. From the invasion and occupation of Alcatraz in 1969 to the occupation at Wounded Knee in 1973, I felt that the various Indian protests had a much deeper meaning than simply securing additional lands for reservations. And at the bottom of everything, I believed then and continue to believe, is a religious view of the world that seeks to locate our species within the fabric of life that constitutes the natural world, the land and all its various forms of life. As long as Indians exist, there will be conflict between the tribes and any group that carelessly despoils the land and the life it supports. And at the deepest philosophical level, our universe must have as a structure a set of relationships in which all entities participate. And within the physical world, this universal structure can best be understood as a recognition of the sacredness of places. I have been very pleased to see the outpouring of books and articles attempting to deal with sacred spaces and places by Indian and non-Indian writers in the 2 decades since God is Red was first published. It will take a continuing protest from an increasingly large chorus to reprogram the psychology of American society so that we will not irreversibly destroy the land we live on. And today, our society is still at a primitive aesthetic stage of appreciating the personality of our lands. But we have the potential to move beyond mere aesthetics and come to some deep religious realizations of the role of sacred places in human life. Feeling that a sufficiently significant number of people are now altered to the ecological meltdown that we face in this revised edition of the book, I have felt free to raise additional questions about our species and our ultimate fate. It seems to me that our history on Earth is far different than what we have been taught to believe. I suggest in this revised edition that we have on this planet 2 kinds of people: natural peoples and the hybrid peoples. The natural peoples represent an ancient tradition that has always sought harmony with the environment. Hybrid peoples are the product of what I refer to in Chapter 9 as ancient genetic engineering that irrevocably changed the way these people view our planet. I can think of no other good reason why the peoples from the Near East, the peoples from the Hebrew, Islamic, and Christian religious traditions, first adopted the trappings of civilization and then forced a peculiar view of the natural world on succeeding generations. The planet, in their view, is not our natural home and and in fact, ours for total exploitation. We are today reaching the nth term in this sequence of exploitation and face ecological disasters of such complete planetary scope as to surpass our wildest imagination. Only a radical reversal of our attitudes toward nature can help us. While it is comforting to see the nations of the world meet and begin to deal with our environmental catastrophe, we may even now be too late to change the conditions we have created. It is extremely disturbing to see so many Americans wanting to clear cut the ancient forests, overgraze the remaining grasslands, and use the precious water of the continents for frivolous consumptive purposes. How many shopping malls and parking lots do we really need? In the United States, we stand but a few dry years from ecological disasters that we cannot begin to fathom. Yet we see our government busy authorizing the destruction of the remaining wetlands on the continent so that a few developers can squeeze yet a few more dollars from a complacent public. We are now in the process of celebrating the 500th anniversary of the discovery of the New World, and the attitudes that marked the original discovery remain entrenched. In two recent decisions, the U.S. Supreme Court has all but prohibited the practice of Indian traditional religions, Lang 1988 and Smith 1990, and opened Indian lands to coalitions of developers, mining interests, and other exploiters. All this exploitation, unwittingly aided by the Christian churches, which have no understanding of the nature of the creation, now presses traditional people to the wall. It gives me no comfort to have predicted religious confrontation 2 decades ago, only to see now its most virulent form. Nor do I look forward to paying the penalties that Mother Earth must now levy against us in order for her to survive. In traveling around the country, I now see revivals of ancient ceremonies in many tribes, as if the people had been warned of the catastrophes that await us. It is time for the people to gather and perform their old ceremonies and make a final effort to renew the earth and its peoples, hooved, winged, and others. And because many of these ceremonies are performed on behalf of the earth, all humans and the other forms of life, it seems incomprehensible that they would be prohibited. But the prohibitions and the failure of the government to protect these traditions only highlights the nature of the conflict. Clearly, the struggle is between a religious view of life and the secularization that science and industry have brought. It remains for us to learn once again that we are a part of nature, not a transcendent species with no responsibilities to the natural world. As we face the 21st century, the next decade will be the testing ground for this proposition. We may well become one of the few species in this vast universe that has permanently ruined our home, and future explorers from other planets will walk this earthly wasteland and marvel at our stupidity and wonder why we could not accept the reality of our own finitude. End of Appendix 3. The end. God bless. Amen. Thank you.